And I remember just thinking, God sees everything from where he's at. And we don't. So I can't see, I don't get why it's taking so long.
Right.
I don't know, but he sees something I can't see for where, like right now I can see all this, but those people down
So you just
there
had
can't.
that wisdom brought to you then.
He just imparted it. It's nothing
Right.
of my own.
Right.
But he was teaching me, I've got it. I have a plan. My timing is perfect. My grace is sufficient. Hold on. Make
Hold
it
on.
another day. Now we explain to her she's in this hospital far from home. She's hooked to this machine because, of course, she could feel the machine and hear it.
So now you're having to explain to her.
And we prayed. We had prayed, God, please put every word in our mouth to explain to our daughter what's happened to her and what lies ahead for her. And he did, you know. And she just was so positive right at the beginning. And our surgeon came in, and he was at the foot of her bed for the first time. She was awake. And we said, Grayson, oh my goodness, this is Dr. Blywise, and he did your surgery. And she goes, and again, this was not like her. She's pretty much a shy little kid, you know. And she goes, come. And he goes like this. He goes,
Like,
goes,
are you talking to me?
yeah, he's like, me? And she goes, yes, come. And so he's like, okay. So he like walks over to the side of the bed, and she's like, thank you for saving me. And he was just overcome. He told us later, he's like, I've never experienced, and he's a Jewish man of Jewish faith, and he said, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And he was very choked up, and he's such a special human being, and so loving. Oh my goodness. So, you know, then the days started to go along, and the question would be, well, when do I get a heart transplant? And now Grayson had to learn to take all these medicines. She was on 12 different medicines every day.
Which is
and
not easy for our child.
And she'd never swallowed a pill, and just,
Was
you know,
that a struggle?
just recovering from a massive open heart surgery, the pain, the things you have to do when they pull out your chest tubes where your fluid drains. It's one of the most painful. They can't numb you. They can't give you anything for some reason. I can't remember, but they yank them out, and they ask you to blow like you're blowing out birthday candles. And she has such a high pain tolerance. Thank you, God. But she was incredible. Wow. But I mean, there were so many things. Being able to sit up was a miracle. Being able to, with her foot, her drop foot and everything on her right side, they brought in a special thing for her shoe. And, you know, she wanted to get up as soon as she could and get walking. And, you know, we pushed the machine. And there were so many things every single day, just getting through the day. And while this machine was miraculous, it was still a machine. And so, you know, she faced death more than once during our time there. And the issue would become like, when will the heart come? And so at first, you know, they tell you it could come next week, it could come next year. So they say, get settled, get an apartment, get your boys taken care of at home. And, you know, so we would have the boys up with us Thursday through Sunday, and then my in-laws would bring them back. And then, you know, having two boys in a pediatric ICU, and how do you have quality time together? And one time they were there, and Grayson had something called a septic shower, which she should have died. Bacteria basically showers into your bloodstream. And
No.
Yes, and people die, healthy people die from that. But she was on this machine, and so she was like, Mommy, and she started shaking, and I went and got the heated blankets, and I was putting them on her, and she goes, Mommy, this is like at the other hospital. This is what it felt like. And I was like, oh dear God, you haven't brought us this far to have this. And it was on the weekend, and they ushered the boys out, and, you know, the attending came in, and he was excellent, and everybody was scared. There was a woman there especially for the Berlin heart care, and so she was very panicked. And praise God, you know, they got her stable, but she very well should have died from that. They kind of told us that later. And so there were
many
crazy
countless
things.
miracles.
Yes, and during our time, like I said, we used to say, well, a heart will come soon. And then we had to stop using that word because what is soon is, so what we learned to say and learned was true was God's timing is perfect, and for whatever reason, he doesn't have your heart for you yet. And so like we had this blog or this Caring Bridge account that we were sharing on and journaling so everybody could know, and it was going all over the world, and people from South America and Japan and Australia were writing on it, and how's Grayson today, or what's the update, or we're praying for you.
Everyone was rooting for her.
Yeah, or I never had faith before, but you're helping me understand. I mean, just crazy things. So sometimes I would say to Grayson, remember right before everything happened back in November when you came to me and you said, Mommy, she had written a song and sang it at church, and all the little girls at school, and they were all saying, you're the next Hannah Montana, because it was like the big thing back then. And she came to me that night after she sang it, she goes, Mommy, I don't want the light to shine on me. I want God's light to shine through me. And earlier that summer, Mommy, how can I grow stronger in my faith? Yes. And so here we are now, fast forward, stuck in the hospital with all this happening, and she, of course, had angry moments, had doubting moments. Yes. Moments. And so I would try to muster through and help her through that. But I would say, remember how you said that to me? And I said, look what God's doing. Look how, I know this is awful for you because you're the one that's dealing with it, but look how he's using you, Grayson, to get his light and love.
To show her the impact that she was having on people.
Because that's how you can get through it. You can get through it one day at a time. Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. Sometimes it's 1 minute at a time. But every single day, I ask the Lord to please give me strength for that day, to be strong for Grayson. And I missed my boys, and they'd call crying, or they
that they missed you.
Yes, and but God never, ever left me hanging there without enough strength for that day, ever. And that's what I know because I lived it.
That he was there with you.
Yeah, and if we are patient, and if we wait, he's always faithful. And we met so many people while we were in the hospital, and a pediatric ICU is one of the most depressing places because there are babies in there, there are sick children, the sickest of the sick. And one day you walk by, we would do laps around the PICU, with Grayson, and you'd walk by that room where that sweet little 6-month-old was, and he's gone. And the room is completely stripped bare. And we'd gotten to know his mom and his, and he died. And then through the night, Grayson endured all those nights alone. It's not like I stayed there, that you couldn't really sleep there. And I had to be, they'd always tell me, you need to be strong for Grayson, you need to get sleep.
Right.
And so I listened to that advice.
Without getting sleep.
No.
That's important.
And, but she, through the night, the codes go off, and all through the night, they're coming in to prod her and check her and clean her sites. That happened like once a week. But I guess I can't even paint the picture enough of what life was like living in the hospital, hooked to a life support machine.
You're like living on the verge of death and life.
You are.
That's where you're living.
Yeah. And also, we weren't sitting around every day like, when is a heart coming? You know why? Because you're trying to survive that day. You're in survival mode.
One thing I remember you saying is you would have her do her school lessons.
I did. Because on the days she felt well enough to do it, some days they were not. But at first they brought in this sweet man, Steve, that kind of teaches sick kids, more so down on the floors where they're not as sick. But we thought, her mind's fine. So she was in 4th grade, so we were like, hey, we'll give it a whirl. But I think, Steve was so sweet. But she's like, Mommy, can you do it? And so as she felt like it, we absolutely did schoolwork. Her teacher was so sweet and sent up everything, and we had so many, all of her classmates sent photos and video. I mean, I made her room as homey feeling as we could, and as you can in a sterile hospital. But so yeah, she was growing weary, and so was I. And I thought, Lord, you told me. I know you told me what you told me, but when is that really going to happen? all tired here. So this is now March, so all these days, and it's just like, and I remember there was a point in March where she was being defiant. And I said, you know what? We're going to pray. And we were in her room, and it was just her and I. And I said, we're going to pray. I said, I'm going to go first, and then you're going to pray. And we're going to pray in the name of Jesus, get behind me, Satan, because I could just tell, like,
She was just getting...
yeah, she was. And she didn't really say anything. And I said, come on. And so we were in the middle of the room, I'll never forget. And so I started praying, and I got through my part, and I was silent. And I was waiting for her to go, and it was crickets. And then she prayed. And she prayed this whole prayer, and when she was done, she goes, Mommy, I'm going to be sick. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, I'm going to be sick. And I remember I grabbed this paper plate that was sitting there, and then I brought the trash over, and she was trying to vomit. And she goes, Mommy, I'm healed. I'm healed. And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, no, Mommy, God told me I'm healed. And I said, so much so that all the time they would come in and do this echocardiogram of Grayson's heart to see, even though her heart was still in there, the machine was attached to it, like, was it getting stronger maybe? Maybe would it be a miracle? So I thought, oh, God's done a miracle maybe. I don't know. Could you guys do an echo tonight? And so they obliged, and, nothing had changed. And I was thinking, but Grayson said, no, God's told me. So it's so interesting that God gave her that message in March to hold on, and that even though we thought it might have looked different and that he had healed her, it was still part of his plan that he was healing her. We just had to wait.
You had to wait.
And so
he had written
yes,
that.
He had.
That was
and we didn't
he
know
put that stamp that you're healed. But
yes,
you had
he
to
did.
wait for the timing.
We had to wait. And so sometimes I would say, and this sounds sort of weird, but I would say, honey, I don't know if the Lord needs another month to prepare this family whose child is going to pass away. Maybe they need to come to know him before this happens. Maybe, I don't know, but he's working this all for good. And I said, remember when we were on the roof of the hospital, because our helicopter nurse Joy would, a couple different times she took us up to the roof. I told you about that. And so one weekend the boys were up and my in-laws, and it was a chilly day, and she's like, you want to get out of this room?
Yeah.
And so we could go for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
unplugged. And so we went up to the roof. We were on the 10th floor. We made it up to the roof, and we were looking out over the University of Florida campus, because you can kind of shoot out and see. And I remember just thinking, God sees everything from where he's at, and we don't. So I can't see, I don't get why it's taking so long.
Right.
I don't know, but he sees something I can't see from where, like right now I can see all this, but those people down there
So you just had
can't.
that wisdom brought to you then.
He just imparted it. It's nothing
Right.
of my own.
Right.
But he was teaching me, I've got it. I have a plan. My timing is perfect. My grace is sufficient. Hold on. Make
Hold
it another
on.
day. And so, again, we weren't waiting for the call when a heart was available. But April 15, now Easter had just passed. Everybody was up. I went to the apartment. I made like food that we'd make for Easter. I'd been trying to do that all along. Like on
Keep
Valentine's, we had a
consistent.
chocolate fountain, and it was Chris's birthday on Super Bowl Sunday. I tried to make nachos, and I don't know, get all the nurses in and have, so this particular weekend was so special because it was Easter, and my husband thought, gosh, maybe God will, Christmas when it happened, hey, maybe Easter,
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I just don't think it's going to be Easter. I don't think so. And he took the boys and went home, and we had watched church on TV with our favorite nurse and our whole family and everything. So he took the boys Sunday and went back home, and he really wrestled that night, and he woke up in the night, and he talks about how he just laid prostrate on our kitchen island, and he just pleaded with the Lord, when is a heart coming? We're weary, Lord. And that, of course, was Sunday. So Monday came, and we were back in our routine, and Tuesday morning, I'm getting out of the shower at my apartment, and I get a call, And it's Barb, our nurse, our transplant coordinator, and she goes, Robin, I think we got a heart.
No.
And I'm like, sopping wet, and I was like, what? And she goes, I think we got a heart for Grayson. We're doing some measurements on the aorta, and but it's looking excellent. And I'm like, okay. So I get out and I call Chris, and he's like, what? What? You know, what do I do? Do I get the boys out of school? Do I get them up? And I'm like, yes, I don't know. So it's so cute because Grayson she knew something was up because usually she would wake up and the nurses would bring in like some bagel or some kind of breakfast. And that morning there was no food. And so I got there probably at like 8:30 and I'm like, good morning. And they were going to let me tell her. And
That's so nice.
so she knew though because
She didn't get bread
to eat anything. And she goes, I knew that later. So I walk in and I go, Sissy, I said, guess what? And she goes, what? And I think I must have had my phone ready because I did take a picture. And I said, they think they found a heart for you. And she's like, you know, whenever I took that picture, and she's like, yeah, you know, and I go, let's pray, let's just thank the Lord. And, you know, they prepare you also for the time when your heart does become available, that even though it looks great on paper, that they can get you into the OR, open you up, and realize that that heart is not compatible for whatever reason, and you may come back without that transplant. And so Grayson knew that, we knew that. You know, again, we weren't thinking about that on the daily by any means, but that day we were, and she prayed in her prayer. You know, I started the prayer and was just thanking the Lord and praying for the family again, whose child had died essentially. And she prayed and she said, dear God, thank you so much. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And she prayed for the family and she said, and God, no matter what happens today, I trust you. So this is her body. She's living because of a machine, and she knew that the possibility of it not working could, you know, what the odds were. And she said, I still trust you. And I remember just being blown away. She's 9 years old and she's saying these things. Now, I didn't mention the part I skipped over accidentally, going back, how Grayson explained to us when she could talk again, and after having been in the coma, she very matter-of-factly said, Mommy, I was in a pit. And I said, no, you know, you've been in the hospital. No, Mommy, I was in a pit. And there were other people around, and it was dark, and I couldn't get out. And I began to listen, and she said, and I was stuck, and it was awful. And I said, how did you get out? And she goes, oh, Jesus. He reached down and he pulled me out. And then I remembered the verse in Psalm 40 where it talks about being in a pit, and I waited patiently for the Lord, and the mud and the bog, and he reached down, he heard my cry, and he lifted me out. And it almost was like verbatim of that scripture in a way. And I was just like, whoa. And then she said, no, I went to heaven. And I said, you did? And she said, yeah. And she goes, Mommy, Jesus. And I said, what is he like? And she goes, Mommy, his light.
His light.
His light. She said, it's all around you. It's warm. It's because I was like, is it like the sun? Is it?
Yeah.
And she goes, no, it's a feeling. It just surrounds you, and you're so safe. She goes, I knew I was so safe.
Wow.
And then she goes, his voice. And I said, oh, and she goes, Mommy, there are no human words to describe his voice. And this is coming from a 9-year-old. You know, I knew it was so true. And she later explained, maybe even after we got home, that she didn't want to leave that. And she knew that he was asking her to go back to her body there. And she didn't. She knew how safe and warm it was there, but she knew she had to go back.
Wow.
And it was profound. But fast forward to the day of her transplant, and you know, they make you wait all day. So my husband arrived with the boys, and they're eating goldfish and snacks, and she's just sitting there, and I've
Like-
braided her hair because we're getting ready for surgery, and I have this photo of her, you know, she's sitting, and they put you back in this hospital
Yes.
robes, and she's like feeling so dopey, and she's like, really, the Tigger? I gotta wear the Tigger robe. And the boy, she's like, really, guys, do you have to eat in here?
Yeah.
And you know, so they roll her back, and it's probably around 7 p.m. and we all roll with her, and actually they normally roll you on the bed, and she was like, I can walk.
Wow.
And the anesthesiologist was like, okay. So everybody has a bed behind her. She walked to the
Wow.
down through the elevators to the OR. They were shocked.
Amazing.
Because for kids, they usually give them something because it's a lot. You know, when you're
Yeah.
going into open heart surgery, and you know it. You know.
And she was just like,
Yeah, and she's like, yeah, I'm good. And she did. She walked, and we're right outside the OR, and then they said, one of you guys can suit up and go in with her. And so my husband said, you know, you go. And we had all prayed together, and so I put the thing on, and we walk in, and I mean, it's a skinny little operating table, and hundreds of knives of just
And did
everywhere.
Grayson see that?
Grayson saw it. Grayson got right up. She gets right up on the thing, you know, her tubes and everything, and her VADs are sticking. And she lays down, and they had the TVs in the ceiling, and they're like, "What do you want to watch?" You know, Wizards of Waverly Place. I mean, it was like some Disney Channel, and she chose some show, and then, you know, I stayed there until the sedative, you know, started to put her out, and I left, and I was just blown away by her.
Wow.
But God had given her every bit of
Bit of
strength.
strength.
Yeah. And so again, that was another 11-hour surgery. She received the heart of a 16-year-old boy named Brian. We have never met his family. We've exchanged letters with them, but you have to exchange letters twice, which we wrote a letter, and it took them about a year to write back. And of course, they tell you, you know, of course, respect. If they never want to write back, that's okay.
Yeah,
You
of
don't know what
course.
anybody's going through, of course. So we just want to thank them, and it has to be completely anonymous. You can't use your names or anything.
Really?
Yeah, or
And
location.
So is it through like the donation that they?
It's through something called Trans Life, and they're an
Okay.
organ procurement agency in the Orlando area, but also elsewhere. And so we don't know where he was from. We just know. In fact, I don't think we were supposed to know his name.
Yeah,
Or
I was
we
wondering
I'm
that.
sorry,
I was
we
like-
didn't know his name. His family let us know that. We weren't even supposed to know his age.
Wow.
So, but we kind of learned that accidentally. And so it was the largest heart she could tolerate because she was 9, her body was small, and at first his heart was tight in her chest cavity. And so your heart rocks like this. And so it was hard for her heart to rock for a little bit, but as she grew, you know, it's been a beautiful heart for her. And her, you know, so she received her heart transplant, and she had said to me, Mommy, when I wake up, can you point there and give me a thumbs up
Yeah.
that it went okay? And I'll know, because she'll be numb, you know, and she's like, just point and give me a thumbs up that
It happened.
it happened. And so it did, you know, and there were so many things after that, like they give you massive amounts of steroids, and we weren't quite aware of that, and it changed her personality.
Oh yeah.
I mean, she became like this angry,
Oh yeah.
and Chris and I just thought, what's
I
happened?
suffered from
Yeah.
like serious I had pneumonia several times as a child. I've been on steroids my whole life, and I would I also am anaphylactic to nuts, so
Man.
part of the treatment is steroids, and I know it makes you feel like you want to rip your skin off your body,
my
like
gosh.
such a level of irritability. So for a 9-year-old, having gone through all
Every
of that,
that.
and then having to have like I can.
And she was just and we felt so sad. You know, we had our masks on in the room, and then they finally explained. They're like, "Oh, it's the steroids." They're like, "That'll
Because you
that'll
thought
help."
maybe it was the
we,
heart
yeah,
or
we
something.
didn't know.
Yeah.
We're like, what, where's our sweet little, you know?
Of course.
So yeah, I mean, and then probably one of the hardest moments for her was after all this time she'd been looking forward to going home, and so they gave us a date. So really, within like 2 weeks, they want you out of there. They're like,
Wow.
bye-bye, you know. And so they said, here's your date, you're going home. So the boys spent the night in her room. We put, you know, yeah, the mirror, the
Yes.
picture. And they were so excited. And I literally was walking out of the room to shut the big glass door, and I looked up at her monitor, and her numbers just didn't look right. So I mentioned it to the nurse, and sure enough, she was having what they call a mild rejection, which really is just adjust your meds, because really in the beginning they're just trying to get your meds
Correct.
right. Yeah. But when the morning came and she was so looking for it, I remember having to tell her, and almost more than anything else that she endured, that was an excruciating moment for her. Excruciating, because she felt like I'm never leaving. I think she felt like I'm never leaving.
Yeah.
But because of that, she actually was able to hold her own heart, because the next day, our geneticist came up and he said, Grayson,
That's cool.
I know. He goes, would you like to hold your heart? We have it. And she's like, okay, And she was so cute. I videotaped it, of course. And at this point, it was this big gelatinous just blob, because after all those months of just being hooked to a machine, it really wasn't, getting blood through it in the way that it should. And so even when they were doing her surgery and they opened her up, normally they would take it out and the heart would still be beating, but it was just like, so it was time.
It was done.
But to hold it, in our own hands, and for us to be able to see it, and they showed us, how the Berlin heart worked with it. I mean, it was fascinating, and something she wrote on her college application to UF.
I bet that stood out a little bit.
Yeah, in the extra comment, she goes, and I would love to be reunited with my heart, which sits on a shelf at UF.
Wow.
Haha, it's a funny thing. But, or my heart's always been in Gainesville, or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cute. But, so, yep, we went home a couple weeks afterward, and every tree in our neighborhood had a big red ribbon with a heart on it, lining. It was beautiful. They had done all this chalk work to the entrance of our neighborhood, all like welcome home, and
wow,
it was so beautiful. All these months being away, we walk in, and of course Chris and I had taken turns coming home to get the boy like that, but obviously great. But our Christmas tree was still up. Everything was Christmas still, and she walked in and to see our dog, and I mean, so emotional. And later that afternoon, everybody gathered, because she was still so immunosuppressed, in our cul-de-sac with balloons and signs, and we sang, and we like pulled our car up, and she sat in the back, and we had like a loudspeaker, and just to answer questions, because so many people had prayed, and it was such a special day. And from that point on, and every day since that transplant, she takes medicine to keep her body from rejecting that heart and attacking that heart. Essentially, it'll always be foreign to her body. But her post-transplant health has been excellent, and that's the word they use in Gainesville when we go. We've gone for 10 years now.
So how old is Grayson now?
She's 20. She's 20 now, and she's a junior at the University of Florida, which is really cool.
What is she studying?
She's studying public relations.
Wow.
Yeah, and she is thriving, to say the least. And so for 10 years, every 3 months, she and I would go up for her checkups with our team up there, and they would always say, "Are you gonna go to school here? Do you
They
wanna?"
wanted her.
And she'd always say, "I don't know." Our cardiologist, Dr. Fricker, who is an amazing human being, he's very soft-spoken. He'd say, "Are you going to apply?" As she was in high school, and secretly she always wanted to go, but it's hard to get in.
It's very
so
hard to
you
get
just
in.
never know. You could have great scores and grades, and you still don't
still
get
not-
in.
yeah.
So she said, when I find out, then I'll be,
more excited.
So so she did get accepted, and that really was such a blessing too for my mom's heart, because her team, everybody's still there.
So for you to have peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Her apartment is, I tell you, 2 minutes from the hospital, tops. And she does get sick. She does do the college thing and burns the candle at both ends, and she's involved in so many things and good causes, and her sorority, and she gets sick. Last year she had a couple really rough viruses where she went to the ER, and again, I can text our nurse, Grayson texts,
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine being somewhere else? So
No.
they know her, they know her history, everything. It's just such a blessing, and it's not far, for me to drive.
For you to drive and see her.
It's such a gift, and she's really involved in dance marathon, which University of Florida raises last year they raised over $3 million for
Wow.
Shands. So Dance Marathon is for Children's Miracle Network.
Okay.
And they're all over the country at universities, and all the money raised goes to your local children's hospital. And so she got involved with it her freshman year, and it's a marathon where they dance for 26.2 hours.
Wow.
Literally, you don't sit down, and you get sponsors, and that's how the money's raised. And
she does that.
yeah, and the cool thing is after we were home probably a year from the hospital, Rollins College called and said, hey, we're doing a dance marathon. Could you guys come and be one of our miracle families? And a miracle family gets up on stage and just shares their story to the dancers because they're like exhausted,
Like
they're
tired, like I can't dance anymore.
So like every hour they have, or every couple of hours, they have a family come up and share to encourage them to keep going. And so we're like, sure. And so Grayson brought a guitar and sang, and I shared our story, and she was probably 11, I think, at the time. And full circle, now she's a dancer. The last 2 years she's on the committee. She's one of the captains, and she's able to encourage, others through it and raise money for Shands, this incredible hospital. Yeah, where she was. And our son actually just brought it to his high school last year because they call them mini marathons.
They can do it
yeah.
Now I want to bring it everywhere.
Yeah, and so we raised $25,000 our first year for Arnold Palmer.
Wow.
Incredible. 2 hospitals that are so important to us.
So important. I feel so blessed to have that in our backyard.
So blessed. I appreciate them so much.
I picked up the crisis survival guide that you and your husband wrote to help families and people in crisis.
Yeah.
And where can somebody get this?
Those we love to give away. If you contact us, we can get those to you. It's just packed full of things that we learned during our crises, and something we know is that everybody is going to face a crisis. You've been through one, you're in one, or you're going to be in one. And of course, this world is hard, and sometimes we have multiple crises, and those are some of the biggest lessons we learned.
What is one thing, like if you could share right now out of here, that you would like to share?
I think never forgetting that God's strength is enough, and that His timing is perfect. So one thing we learned was, don't ask, why, God, are you allowing this? Why would you allow my daughter to suffer like this? Why? I never even thought that. I don't know how. My husband did. I don't know how I did. I think I didn't.
Everyone does.
Yeah, I think I didn't, just because I was so close to it and in it every day.
Right.
Not that I wasn't weary or frustrated or sad or any of those things.
Right.
I was all of those things. But I did ask Him, what are you doing? You're doing something I don't understand. And I know, and a lot of times we're never going to understand it because we're not God. But trusting that He knows what He's doing. That was huge. His timing is perfect. And just knowing that His strength is enough and taking it one day at a time. That is one of the biggest lessons I learned, because as a mom, I had, I was like, oh, it's all good. I got it on the calendar. Everybody. Yeah. But that all blew right up in my face.
And when you're like, have kids in grade school and stuff, the months go by like day at a time. You're like, wait, it's
insane.
October, like, wasn't it just New Year and it's Christmas
crazy
again? And,
I know.
So that's a big, just take it one day at a time.
And such a lesson. And even now, and when we got home, we called it our new normal, which it was. We had a new normal. But real quick, life kind of goes back to, remember I talked about earlier, when Jesus is all you have, you realize that Jesus is all you need. But a lot of times when your life becomes sort of, normal again, you start to take back on everything, even the small things. Because the Lord wants even your small things, not just these big life or death. He wants all of your concerns to be laid at His feet and for us to trust Him with it. But usually, like I said earlier, we're like, oh, I got it.
Oh, yeah, I experienced that too.
And it's like, it's like, I know what I know, that I know how beautiful and peaceful it is to lay it at his feet. But yeah, here I am again,
Right.
just going right back into my, you know.
Into your plan and
yeah,
your will. And
I'll plan it this way, and I'm sure it's going to go like this. And
Yep.
so it really is a daily thing to sort of just give it over.
Give it over to God.
And sometimes, like I said, it's an hour by hour thing, you know. My friend with her husband dealing with cancer, that's what I tell her all the time. It's ask him for strength to get through this hour, through his
That's
procedure,
something
through his.
my dad has always said that to me.
Oh, wow.
One day at a time.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. One day at a time.
Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. He tells us that, you know, but we usually are worried about all that stuff.
Next year.
Yeah, especially as mom. And that's another thing I learned that he taught me. I don't really worry about stuff now. Like
Oh, you don't?
Well, you know what? I could sit and worry about the medicine that Grayson's been taking for the last 10 years when I read the side effects. It's cancers and it's horrific things and it's, you know, but I'm sorry, but that's not for me to worry about. The Lord has Grayson in the palm of his hands. He has a plan for a hope and a future for her. And what good is it going to do me? What good is that going to do me to sit and worry about if she gets cancer? What if I sat and worried about every day and pined over, will she need another heart transplant? That's a reality, you know, but that's not serving God. That's not allowing God to do what he does.
Right. Do you ever feel like you have to like have these like great quality moments, and like was it ever hard? Like I know you said you get in the day-to-day quickly, but was it ever difficult to live in the day-to-day and feel like you could live like normal routines and stuff?
No, I mean, with the busyness of life, you kind of do get thrown back into that. Now, there are kind of those wake-up moments. I'll have, like, there are moments where Grayson, post-transplant, got very, very sick. And at one point, we had to go back up there and check in. That was really hard. And that was earlier on. So there are moments like that where it brings it real quick, right back. Yeah. But as life goes on, and something we often don't talk about with our story, but is a massive reality, is survivor's guilt. I think I mentioned that in the Mom's Talk. Grayson was struggling right around the age of 13 with massive survivor's guilt, and I didn't know it. I just saw that her joy was gone. Her joy was gone. And one day I asked her, and she is not a crier. She doesn't emote, and she just almost like this guttural weeping, and I hate myself, why am I alive, why did I get to live, and my donor had to die, why did that girl that had brain surgery have to die, and her room was stripped bare in the you know, and it was just, and I remember just as she was saying it, I was like, God, what do I say? God, please give me the words. I don't even know how to answer this. You know, it's like, how do I even console her? But again, it comes back to the Lord's plan, and you know, I don't know why Brian had to die, honey. I don't know. I don't know why God chose Brian, you know, or why He saw fit for you to keep living. Can you imagine trying to process that when you're 13?
But I think not knowing is the best answer.
And it is just
you know,
true.
like sometimes you just
we don't
know.
And we're not supposed to know because we're not God.
And for your child to see that you're okay not knowing the answers all the time,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like making peace with that is definitely like an example for them, I think.
For
to
sure.
be able to say that honestly, I don't know.
I don't know.
And for her to make peace with just not knowing.
Yeah. And it was a process, and she never wanted to go to a counselor, you know, a professional. She would say, they're just not going to understand, Mom, because unless you've been through it. So then we would just talk and try to talk it out. And that's really what we've done all these years in prayer, and of course, and her faith is immense. But as she hit like high school years, again, we had a very big church. Everybody would shower upon her, well-meaning from the time it happened. You're a miracle. God has saved you for something huge. Now, she's now this little kid carrying, like, what does that mean? do I have to be perfect? And now you hit high school and you're just like every other teenager and you just want to melt
lot of
in.
pressure.
A lot of pressure. And so she said, I can't be this. So she basically just wanted to turn from being Grayson, the miracle, and just be something else.
Just be Grayson.
Yeah. And so, and I said, you know what? God very well might have saved you, just like he saves all of us, to be Johnny's mom one day. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to go save the world with a cape on your back.
Well,
Like,
and we don't have to save the world.
No.
Like, I mean,
but she had to grasp that. And frankly, you know, I had to find a way to put that into words for her at the time. And she came full circle with that as
I
well.
could see that being really difficult.
Yes.
Like, I was saved for this purpose.
Yeah, and people are well-meaning, and they say that to you all the time. And but what does that even mean?
Right.
You know. So that was just a short stint, but she has, since everything happened. I mean, we've gone on television shows. We've shared. We just wanted to share God's goodness, God's faithfulness.
Out of appreciation.
Yes, and you just
Thanksgiving.
want to encourage anybody that's going through any type of crisis, because we can. That's what that book is. And we wrote a book about our story. My husband did, called Grayson's Song, and it's a lot of. It obviously is our story, but it's a lot of those journal entries too. People would share with us how profound those were on the daily for them, and life-changing, which we didn't know at the time. Again, God was just writing those through us. But and
Where can someone get the book?
Grayson's Song is on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm like, I think it's still on there.
We'll double check.
Yeah, I know. At one point it was at like Barnes and Noble. It was so cute. But
Just if someone watches and wants to read it, you know.
It
do.
is a beautiful. You bring a pack of tissue, you know,
Oh,
but she's really been able to just use what she learned living in the hospital. Like, the medical staff will often ask her to give her input on things over the years. Different groups, even our cardiologist texted her last year. He's like, "Hey, Gray, could you come speak to my graduating class? I really want you to share." You know, and she goes in and she's funny and tells her story, and you know, he goes, "I think they learned more in the 30 minutes Grayson spoke than." But it's just because she has this wisdom too, and
That came through.
with it all, and so she definitely sees it as a blessing now, whereas before, you know, through certain circumstances, it can be like, ugh.
Especially teenage.
Yeah, the teenage years.
I mean, everything kind of
Yeah,
was like.
could be like that. Exactly. I know.
She's just a normal teenager.
She is, and that's what I always would tell
that's
people.
what you wanted.
She's just
Like,
normal.
And I'm sure in the hospital you were like, I just want her to like be a normal and like, you know what I mean? Like, have a normal high school experience. And trust me, in high school you just want to, you know, coast, like
Melt in,
yeah,
be not stand out, you know,
Right.
and that's really what she wanted, and she realized.
That's
and
cool.
we're at a small school too, so that was
hard.
yeah. But so she's doing great. She's coming home this weekend, so I'm so happy
Oh, that's
to see her. And I
amazing.
haven't actually seen her since she went up to school in August, which is bizarre because
Wow.
normally. So
Well,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you telling your story so much
you.
and coming here today and giving us all hope and so many lessons and takeaways of how to apply, you know, what you went through when crisis strikes, and just how to live life according to that, the principles that you learned and shared. So
yeah, it's kind of a weird, you know, you wouldn't wish it upon anybody to have to go through that.
No.
At the same time, I'm so grateful for what I did learn, because I have been able to live my life with that knowledge since then. Obviously, it doesn't mean it's perfect by any means, or that I don't still have, you know, burdens or struggles. But at least, like I say, I know what I know because I lived it.
Yeah.
And I can fall back on that and teach that to our kids, you know,
Right.
too, which is a huge lesson for them moving forward. And the one thing we saw in the hospital was so many families whose children were sick, who didn't have hope, who did not have an ounce of faith, and they were torn apart. literally families just obliterated, divorce, arguing. In fact, they told us, they said, it is so rare for us to have an intact family in the PICU. They often were like, we're so sorry we don't have more space for you to be together, but we don't have intact.
This often.
Yeah, because you would just see the despair, and it was eye-opening for me, and I would try to shed some light for those folks and just smile and love on them and give them hope, and let them know where our
You
hope
were a
comes
light
from.
in a dark place there.
Yeah, it is a dark place. But he carried us.
He did.
He still does.
Thank you so much,
You're
Robin.
so
I
welcome.
really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you with our next story.